Well, folks, we have some nerfs and buffs on the way to Hearthstone, including Snowfall Guardian, as you can see behind me, with a handful of other changes that have been confirmed by Blizzard. Now, you might hear some rumors and leaks about other cards because Blizzard kind of accidentally revealed all of these changes today. They put a patch out that updated a lot of these cards live in-game well before they were supposed to, so people were like, wait a minute, my card's not doing what it's supposed to do, or it has the wrong stats. People started speculating that they were indeed early balance changes, and Blizzard came out and went ahead and confirmed it. Yeah, actually, whoops, we put a patch live early. Some of you saw some changes, and they went ahead and confirmed a handful of the changes that people were seeing, which we're going to talk about in this video, but also tease that there will be additional buffs as well that perhaps weren't as seen by the community. There are some rumors floating out there for what those are going to be, but for this video, I'm going to stick to the ones that Blizzard confirmed for sure, because there might be, small changes or tweaks that were still incorrect based on speculation. So this will give you a preview. If you want to just read this and pause it and stop the video, that's cool. You'll get all you need. But I'm going to go ahead and talk through these in a little bit more detail. Kicking things off here with the Snowfall Guardian. This one is getting a stat boost. What? It's a 5/5 Regis, but of course it's losing its key effect here that it will not gain +1/+1 for each frozen minion. So no longer will this be like a 10/10, a 15/15, and the macaw that follows it up won't be a 15/15 as well. So it's still going to have that utility of freezing the board and locking people down, but it won't have quite as much of that counter pressure where it's suddenly like after a couple turns, you just hit them for 30 and they're dead. So it might give opponents time to kind of work their way through the snowfall boards where they're frozen over and over again without that threat of immediate death. And I think that's going to make a big impact for Snowfall Guardian. Often it was the fact that you could just turn the corner and start whacking them in the face that made this card so darn threatening. It's like deny them anything while hitting them really hard. Now you're going to actually have to have some follow-up and demand other ways to end the game, which, to be fair, Shaman's really good at right now. They've got things like Sired and Athreus as game-ending plans, but for the Snowfall Guardian lines, at least, you're not going to be able to end the game in just a couple short turns. Now, that said, I still think this card will get played. I think the utility of having that freeze with a body attached is still going to be useful to a variety of decks because Shaman has those other win conditions now with things like Denathrius. This will still serve as a good way to lock down board-based decks. It's not going to be the crazy overpowered card that it often feels like today, but I think it will still retain some utility. I think Snowfall Guardian still gets played, and even with Macaw, it's still nice to just have 4 straight turns where your opponent can't hit you with minions on board. I don't think that utility is going away just because it loses its scaling. And another change here is Vial Library is going to be losing its base buff. So right now, the way Vial Library works is it'll give a friendly minion +1/+1 no matter what. You don't have to have any imps on board. That's a cool design feature, frankly, that Blizzard has tried to implement with a lot of cards where they sort of work at a baseline. They don't have to have these conditions necessarily, which can feel a lot better to play, so that if you don't have imps, you still get some use case out of your Vial Library. It doesn't feel like it's a totally dead card. The problem is, of course, then when you have this repeat for each imp effect, it just makes all the buffs that 1/1 bigger than they would otherwise be. So Blizzard's killing the base 1/1, and now you have to have imps on board for any Vial Library buffs to take effect. So essentially this takes +1/+1 off the buff for those imp boards. And that does make a difference. That little bit of extra damage of those like 6/6 imps are now going to be 5/5 imps. A little bit more susceptible to removal, more susceptible to trades. They aren't pumping out quite as much damage. Those little incremental changes like that can add up to big changes over the course of a game state. So I think taking just a little bit of the edge off Vial Library will definitely be a way to hit Imp Warlock without totally killing the archetype. It'll still be a good deck as a result of this change, I'm sure, but it'll just make some matchups feel a little bit more fair. For Hunter here, we've got another what I would call pretty small change. This is the Stag Spirit Wild Seed, one of the cards summoned off the various Wild Seed cards, of course, like Erelon, the Legendary, for instance, and it's now going to give you a 3/2 Great Bow instead of a 4/2 Great Bow. So the Stag Spirit Wild Seed was the definite like mega high roll for Wild Seed cards. Very often you were happy to get the nice 5/4 body on top of a 4/2 weapon, which was just really insane damage output for Hunter. This is limiting that, essentially removing 2 damage total. And this is another one of those things where it doesn't really sound like much, but it just gives people a little bit more wiggle room, maybe 1 extra turn to stabilize or do their own thing or initiate their own win condition before they're overwhelmed by all this damage. And those small changes tend to have bigger impacts than people realize. So I don't think this by any means kills Wild Seeds. This still feels like the high roll reward. A 5/4 with a 3/2 is still insane as a part of all these other cards getting summoned. It's just taking the edge off once more a little bit, making all of this feel like a healthier package. And then this change is a really, really big one. Celestial Alignment will no longer affect both players. And like with all the cards in this video, I made this up myself. I just custom carded these together. Blizzard did not send us these images, so this is probably not the final text. Set yourself to 0 mana crystal sounds really weird, but it was quick and easy as an adjustment to the previous text. But essentially what it means is only you will have the effect of Celestial Alignment. So no longer will you put your opponent to 1 mana as well. And that is an enormous functional change, because part of the reason Druid could do so much work with Celestial Alignment is because once they went to 1 mana like their opponent, they could then ramp out of it with cards like Nourish, gaining a huge mana advantage in short order against their opponent, and then just snowballing off the back of that in really quick fashion. So now that only Druid is impacted, there are still ways to take advantage of that. There are cards like Lady Anaconda that you could play down and help you cheat out nature spells, but no longer is it this like race condition where you're heavily favored against the opponent in a Celestial Alignment scenario. Also, of course, this removes the upside of something like Convoke the Spirits that randomly casts Celestial Alignment, completely shutting down your opponent while you do some insane awesome turn where Celestial was just sort of a happenstance result, not even part of your game plan. So all in all, a much healthier state for Celestial Alignment as far as I'm concerned. It probably does kill the card in most cases as far as I'm concerned. In standard format, I don't play this deck a lot, so I can't speak to it, but I think limiting your opponent is a big part of the use case for Celestial Alignment. So I can't imagine many decks are really going to take advantage of this unless they're specifically doing like Lady Anaconda pop-off turns or something, but I haven't seen that so much lately. It's just general big crazy ramp Druid stuff as a payoff. So all in all, I don't think you'll see this one nearly as often. It more importantly perhaps won't be nearly as detrimental when it's randomly created off other stuff. It won't feel quite so bad because the opponent is just like, ha, you only have 1 mana. It might actually hurt the Druid more than it helps them in some cases. So this is a change a ton of people have been asking for, and I think certainly it's going to be a welcome one indeed. Next up here for Wild, we've got the Kobold Illusionist going to 5 mana. If you haven't been following Wild, the reason for this is that Sketchy Information, the 3 mana rogue spell that tutors a death rattle out of your deck and then activates the death rattle, but it has to cost 4 or less, was being used to tutor Kobold Illusionists out of the deck, activating that death rattle, and then summoning things like a Neptulon, essentially super early in the game, and just overwhelming opponents. So Big Rogue became powerful because of that combination. So by pushing Kobold Illusionist to 5 mana, it can no longer be tutored by Sketchy Information, thus limiting the ability for that deck to get some really crazy early pop-offs with like a Preparation Sketchy into some monster stuff. So this will essentially take down those crazy high rolls in Wild format. Very effective small change. I don't think anybody's going to be really sad about Kobold Illusionist going to 5 in any other scenario. Maybe somebody like Dane out there who loves using this card, but otherwise I think a really nice healthy change. All right, so now on to the side of buffs. I can't believe this one, but Edwin is going to 3 mana. He's now going to be a 3 mana 3/3 instead, which is a great change for Edwin as far as power level is concerned, because part of the big issue for Edwin was the overhead. Starting off at 4 mana sometimes wouldn't leave you a lot of mana left to actually play your cards and then realize those buffs on Edwin, but starting him a mana cheaper just gives you more mana to work with as a payoff. And Edwin was frankly already a pretty solid card. A lot of decks found ways to use this. It was kind of just card draw in a pinch. It could get you a big body and a handful of cards, and that was awesome. And now he's going to be even better at that. The 1/1 off the baseline here does not matter at all for a card like this, because it's all those additional stats where he gets most of his value. So I think this is going to be a very useful card. Might be played in Miracle Rogue decks as another way to draw a lot of cheap stuff like Miracle Rogue already wants to do, but might just be good in any kind of rogue deck at this level, because it's just such an efficient way to get stuff going in your deck. So all in all, this looks like it's going to be a very powerful card at 3 mana. This is a big buff to rogue, I think. And then also one of the tease buffs for Demon Hunter, and there were a couple other teases floating around, but this is again the only one that's confirmed. But I don't think this will be all we see for Relic changes, but it's a good start. Relic Vault here moving to 2 mana, and the Relic package just felt really hard to get online. It takes a long time to get everything spinning up. Once it's spun up, it feels great, but very rarely does the meta allow you to play all these really weak cards along the way. And making a piece like this much cheaper can really help, because when Relic Vault is going, that's when the deck feels best. So being able to weave this into a turn more easily, play this down a turn earlier than normal so they can play something better perhaps the turn after, all of that's going to contribute to advancing the Relic game plan faster, which is going to make a big change for Relics. If these get enough buffs, I do think Relic Demon Hunter could actually be pretty dang good and maybe even a little scary. So keep an eye on this archetype. If there's at least one other buff to complement this, as I think there might be, then this one could be good for sure. And there you go. That wraps it up for all these changes. What do you guys think? I think the way this is worded, there may not be any other nerfs coming. So if you were expecting other things, I did see some teases for things like Kael'thas maybe getting nerfed, but the way this was written, it kind of sounded like those were all the nerfs, but there are more buffs. That said, stay tuned. Again, this is all unconfirmed except for what's written here by the Blizzard dev until Tuesday is when we would normally expect the patch. That's the typical patch scheduling for post-expansion cycling there. So stay tuned for more final confirmation. We'll talk about what other buffs we might see in the meantime. But yeah, what do you think about these changes? Good, bad? What are you excited to see and do? What else do you want to see buffed? I think Warrior in particular, as he teased here. If you're Paladin, Demon Hunter, and Warrior fans, you have a lot to look forward to. So excited to see where those changes will take us. But all in all, I'm glad Snowfall Guardians getting nerfed. I'm glad Celestial Alignment's getting nerfed. But what do you think? Share those thoughts below. That's it. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos on all of these topics in the next few days. And until next time, game on.